Okay, this is the second video covering simplifying expressions with algebra tiles. This is the third part that we've gone over with simplifying expressions, and this is just the second video covering this worksheet. So in the last video, in the last lesson, we practiced modeling order of operations with these algebra tiles. Remembering that the order of operations is the order we do the operations. We might also want to include the understanding that the order of operations is the order that we model our expressions. So even when we're modeling them, we need to follow this order, which means the first thing I need to model, the first thing I need to be looking at is the grouping symbols. After the grouping symbols, we can look at exponents. We won't see any of that today in today's lesson. After we model the grouping symbols, we're going to look for multiplication and figure out how we're going to model that. Hint, hint, it's going to be related to those grouping symbols. And then finally, we can look at addition and subtraction. So, reviewing some of those original problems, this one was just combining like terms. We had a good discussion about adding negatives, why we changed subtraction to adding a negatives, and then we modeled it, and then we were just combining like terms. And number two was distribution only, where we modeled the groups, we modeled the correct number of groups, and then this was an interesting one because we also had to turn everything to its opposite. That's going to come up again later on today. And then number three is where we really started combining all of those things together, where we have modeling groups, multiple groups, we have the distribution, but then we also have combining like terms afterwards as well. So, picking up right where we left off, key to success here is with the order of operations. I will get you started with one hint, one clue, and that is I see subtraction. So we're going to change the subtraction to not just addition, but yes, adding a negative. So 4 plus 3, and then parentheses x plus a negative 2. And when we tried this yesterday, when I let you guys try it on your own, we struggled. And we struggled because we didn't pay attention to the order of operations. Where should I be looking first? What should I be modeling before anything else? The group. Do you see a group here? Will you model it? After you model the group, we don't have any exponents, so we can move on to multiplication. Then you can model that. Let's give this another try, really focusing on the order of operations, focusing on modeling that group first. We're going to pause the recording as students try this one more time, and then we'll come back together and do it all together. All right, if we focused on the order of operations, starting with our grouping symbol, this turned out so much better. What I saw when I walked around the room, I saw an X tile and 2 of these negative tiles, yeah? Oops, hold on. Let me fix that. Because that's what's in a group. And then to show that it's in a group, I can go ahead and put a box around it saying, hey, this is in a group. So we modeled the grouping symbols. Any exponents? No. Any multiplication? Yeah, there is multiplication. That multiplication is what's happening between the parentheses and the 3. But how do we interpret that? When we see the 3 and then these parentheses, we interpret that to mean what, Miley? 3 groups, exactly. So that's the next step. Now that I see that multiplication, I interpret that to mean we have 3 of those groups. Okay, I've now even modeled the multiplication in those 3 groups, and then I can continue on. Any addition or subtraction? Yeah, we're adding 4. That's 4 of those unit tiles. And I'm going to put them at the front. It's okay if you put them at the back. I'm putting them at the front just because I'm trying to model exactly what the expression says. So I can see we have 4 plus 3 groups of x and a negative 2. And I'm going to kind of model what this is going to look like, right? When we simplify, the first thing we do is we get rid of the groups. And when I get rid of the groups, I'm like, wow, I've got 3 x tiles, and I have 6 negative tiles and 4 positive unit tiles, and I'm going to start combining these positives with these negatives. Looks like I'm going to create some 0 pairs. So what is it that I have left? When it's all the way simplified, I can count it up. 1, 2, 3 x tiles. And these were all zeros, but I have 1, 2 negative unit tiles. So 3x plus a negative 2. Now I'm going to reset this so that it looks in my notes the way that it did originally. So remember how we talked about how eventually we want to be able to do this without getting out those algebra tiles. Today's the last day we're going to take those out. So I also want to show over here in this space, the final simplified answer, how we're going to do this when we no longer use the algebra tiles. So add this to your notes with me. But the key thing is we do it the same way without algebra tiles as we would do with the algebra tiles. The first thing that I do is I say, hey, I've got a group. Can I combine X's and unit tiles? No, Mrs. Proctor. Okay. So let's just confirm what I just asked. Can we combine this and these? Can we like say, oh, that's 3 tiles? No. All right. Thank you. So we can't combine those. So the parentheses must be there for a reason, right? Since I can't do what's inside, the parentheses must be there for some other reason. What is the other reason that they're there? Because we have 3 of those groups. So that's our first step in solving this, is we have 3 groups of X. Notice what I did. Let me back up. I'm sorry. Can't simplify the grouping symbols. So G, done. No E for exponents. Is there multiplication or division? Yes. So I'm moving on to that multiplication because the 3 groups of X plus a negative 2 means 3 times X plus a negative 2. But that 3 isn't just being multiplied by the X. We have 3 groups of X. But that's not all. We also have 3 groups of negative 2. So 3 groups of the negative 2. Again, we're kind of looking across all of those groups, ignoring the fact that they're in groups and just counting up everything that we have across those groups. But then once we have taken care of that, we don't want to forget there's still this part. We haven't really looked at it, we haven't really addressed it, but it's still there. So we need to make sure we bring it on down. We have our 4 plus, and then this step that we simplified. And now I'm going to kind of redo this exact same step. Still not going to touch that 4 plus, just bring it on down. If I have 3 groups of X, what do I have? 1, 2, 3 X's, right? Okay. And means I'm adding. And I have 3 groups of negative 2. If I have 3 groups of negative 2, that means I have negative 6. And at this point, remember this is where, when I gotcha, I'm going to move even those. These things are out of the group now, and now that they're out of the group, now we can start combining those like terms. Moving those unit tiles, the positive unit tiles, with those negative unit tiles. And we're going to do the same thing with our expression. We have positive 4 unit tiles here, and we have 6 negative unit tiles here. So I'm going to move those over to show that they're being combined. And again, when we do that, what do we have? 2 of those negative tiles, because everything else zeroed out. Did I do anything with this? Did it combine with anything else? No, so it still just comes straight down. We have 3x tiles. 2 ways to write it, 3x minus 2 or 3x plus a negative 2. Either way is perfectly acceptable. And that's how I got there, showing all of my steps without those algebra tiles. Great improvement from yesterday because you focused on the order of operations. You modeled the grouping symbols first. So let's take that lesson as we move on to number 4. There's number 4. 5. Just kidding, I'm sorry, 5. We did 4. Take that lesson from 4 and apply it to to problem number 5. I'm going to pause the recording as you guys work this out. Use those algebra tiles. Where should we start on this problem? Probably with grouping symbols. Yeah. Yep, with your groups. Pausing the recording. Ready, set, go. Okay, again, great improvement. You guys are focusing on exactly the things that you need to do, which means we're focusing on the grouping symbol first. So the first thing I'm going to model is getting 3 X tiles up there. And I see -1, so I know that that means a negative unit tile. And that's in a group, so I'm going to go ahead and put a box around it. I successfully modeled the grouping symbol just as you did. What's my next step? Talk me through it since you guys have already completed this. What's my next step? Allie? We need 2 groups, exactly. Again, the order of operations, we did the grouping symbol. No exponents, we're looking at multiplication. There is multiplication. That multiplication is saying there are 2 of those groups. Okay, got that done. What's my next step? Jada? Exactly. We look at the beginning and we see that there's 4 more X tiles that I need. So I've got those 4 X tiles there at the beginning. Love technology that I can just move this around on my paper and you guys can't on yours. But there we go, 4 X tiles. And what else? CJ? 5 unit tiles. And where are we putting them? Right back there at the end, right? If you can model it, you can do it. Because at this point, all we really truly need to do, get rid of the groups and count up what you have. So when I get rid of those groups and I count up what I have and I'm like, hey, those negatives are going to come over here and zero some things out, makes it really nice and easy to see that we have 6 plus 4 more is 10 x tiles. Some of these negative tiles zero out these positive tiles, so I have 10x plus 3. Now, eyes on the screen, because again, we want to be able to do this without those algebra tiles eventually. So let's see what that's going to look like if we're just doing this abstractly, no tiles. Starting at the beginning, just rewriting the problem. 4x plus 2 groups of 3x plus a negative 1 plus 5. We say, hey, I can't combine x tiles with negative 1 tiles. Even though they're in a group and we should do that first, I can't combine them. So this must be telling me that I need to do this multiplication. So 2 groups of 3x and 2 groups of negative 1. That takes care of those groups that we modeled first. And don't forget, we still have these other parts. We're not doing anything with them yet, but we need to make sure we bring them down so that they're not forgotten. So that 4x comes straight down, the plus 5 comes straight down. And going to take this one extra step, 2 groups of 3x, you can count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 6x tiles. 2 times 3 is 6. So 2 times 3x is going to be 6x. And 2 groups of negative 1, or 2 times negative 1, is negative 2. And again, that's me just simplifying this part, taking care of those groups. Let's bring down that plus 5 at the end and bring down the 4x plus at the beginning. And again, at this point, it was just combining like terms, where I can see 4x tiles and 6x tiles all together. That's going to be 10x tiles. And I can see I've got some negative unit tiles that I'm going to combine and zero out some of these positive unit tiles. 2 of them will zero out, and that leaves me with 3 of those unit tiles left. How'd you guys do? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. Okay, good. For a thumb sideways, any questions, comments? Were we able to find mistakes? Did you just need more time? Okay, silence. Number 6. This one's a challenging one. I'm going to give you some hints. Did you figure it out, Kaden? CJ, got it? Okay, good. Here's the tip for success. Do you see all this subtraction? Let's change that to adding a negative. Always. 5. Plus a negative 3. Groups of 2x plus a negative 1 plus a negative 4x. So when I'm starting to model this, notice that I'm going to be modeling this first, right? How many groups do I need to model? 3 groups. But what does this mean right here? Jada, what does that mean? We're changing everything to the opposite. So this is like combining everything we've done so far, including number 2. Remember, we saw this one on number 2. We had our 2x plus a negative 3. We had 4 groups of it, but then we had to change everything to the opposite in all 4 of those groups. So we're combining that with all of the other stuff that we've done. Give it a try. We'll model it together in just a second, but give it a try on your own first. Pause the recording. Use those virtual algebra tiles if needed. Ready, set, go. All right. Great start on this one. We're starting with our group, which means in a group, I'm going to have 2 x tiles and a negative unit tile. 2x plus a negative 1. That's in a group. And I know what you guys are thinking. Why are you doing green ones? I'm doing green ones because I'm modeling the problem in the order that it should be modeled, right? Because the problem says 2x plus a negative 1. So 2x tiles a negative 1. How many of those groups do I have? 3 of those groups. So there's my second. There's my third. There's all of my groups. So I've got my 3 groups of 2x plus a negative 1. But now what does that mean right here? It means the opposite of those groups. So what is the opposite of these green positive x tiles? What is the opposite of the greens? Berkeley. The negatives, exactly. So those need to be red. And these are all reds. They're negatives. What is the opposite of all of those reds? Kaden. All the yellows. Exactly. So now I've turned everything to its opposite. Now we can continue modeling. I have 5. We're adding 5 at the beginning. So I'm going to include 5 unit tiles here. And at the end, 4 negative x tiles. And again, now that it's modeled, we modeled the groups, we modeled the correct number of groups, we even modeled turning all of the groups to their opposite. Now we don't have to worry about the groups anymore. We can get rid of those groups and move things around and count up what we have. That means I'm probably going to move these unit tiles over here with these ones, move these x tiles over here with these ones, and we can count it all up. But I want my notes to stay this way, so I'm going to keep it like that. Let's count up what we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 x tiles, but those x tiles are all red, so negative 10x. And I'm going to count up all of the unit tiles that I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So plus 8. How were we going to do this when we no longer have algebra tiles? Basically, the exact same way that we did it with the algebra tiles. 5 plus a negative 3 groups of 2x plus a negative 1 plus a negative 4x. Just like we modeled with our algebra tiles, we started with our group. So I'm going to model 3 groups of that, but at the same time, I'm also going to turn everything to its opposite. This is what that distribution looks like. We're saying we have not just 3 groups of 2x, but we have the opposite of 3 groups of 2x. Or in other words, take a look. That says negative 3 times 2. And I don't just have 3 groups of negative 1. I have the opposite of 3 groups of negative 1. So plus a negative 3 times a negative 1. Don't forget that we need to bring this down. Haven't done anything with it, but we don't want to forget it. So we bring down the plus 5. We bring down the plus a negative 4x. We didn't make any changes, but we can't forget them, so we just bring them down. Okay, took care of that multiplication part mostly. Let's just really take care of it. Not just 3 groups of 2x, but the opposite of 3 groups of 2x. 3 groups of 2x is 6x, but the opposite of that is going to be negative 6x. Negative 3 times 2 is a negative 6. So negative 3 times 2x is going to be negative 6x. And 3 groups of negative 1 is going to be negative 3, but it's the opposite of that. The opposite of 3 negatives is going to be 3 positives. Or in other words, a negative 3 times a negative 1 is a positive 3. Okay, took care of that. Took care of that. I should keep that one red so that you can see how I simplify. This simplifies to positive 3. This simplifies to negative 6x. I simplified those one last time, and then we bring everything else straight down. And then we're like, hey, it's out of the group now. Now I can just combine like terms. Now I can rearrange these things, move them around. I have 5 positive unit tiles and 3 positive unit tiles. That's how I get 8 positive unit tiles. I have these 6 negative x tiles and these 4 negative x tiles. So altogether I have 10 negative x tiles, or negative 10x. That one was the hardest one. I don't think it really gets any harder than that. This next one is, I think, in a way, slightly easier than the last one. So we have enough time. We can probably finish this. This is your homework. So if you want to finish your homework in class, there's enough time to finish your homework in class, and we can probably even go over it. So let's see what we have time for in the video. You guys work at your own pace, work with your groups, and then at the end of class, if we have time, we'll go over it in the video. Okay, number 7 altogether now. I see subtraction, only one subtraction, so 5 plus a negative 2 groups of 3x plus 4 plus 3. So when I model this, I'm going to start off with my 3x tiles and my 4 unit tiles. All of that's in a group. So order of operations, say, let's do the group first. Done that. Any multiplication? Yeah, the multiplication is telling us there are 2 of those groups. So there's the first group, there's the second group. But when I'm also trying to model those groups, I also see it's not just 2 groups, it's the opposite of those 2 groups, just like in our last problem. Which means all of these are going to change to the opposite. And all of these that are in that group, those are also all going to change to their opposite. So what was negative is now positive, and what was positive is now negative, which means I've got all negatives here. So that takes care of modeling the groups and the multiplication. It looks like the last thing I need to do is model this plus 5 at the beginning. And at the end, the plus 3. And now that it's all modeled, the whole point of simplifying is removing those groups and combining like terms. And you're going to notice that when I try and combine like terms here, I've got these positive 4 tiles that are all going to zero out those 4 tiles. Right? And this tile and these, they all end up zeroing out. So what is it that I'm left with? 6 tiles, they're all negative and they're all x tiles, so negative 6x. A lot of students, when I walked around, I saw that it said negative 6x plus 0. That's fine. That's great. You're acknowledging that there aren't any unit tiles. It's also not necessary. If you want to keep it there, keep it there. I think it's a good habit to get into. When I show the steps for how we do it without the algebra tiles, it looks like this. Here's our group. We can't combine x tiles with unit tiles, so I can't simplify that any further. So I look outside of the group and say, is there any multiplication happening? Yeah. So I have not just 2 groups, but I have negative 2 groups of 3x. And I don't just have 2 groups of 4, I have negative 2 groups of 4, or the opposite of 2 groups of 4. Not doing any changes here, so that comes straight down. Don't want to forget about it. Not doing any changes here, so that comes straight down as well. I can see I have negative 2 groups of 3x, or negative 2 times 3x. That's negative 6x. And I have negative 2 groups of 4. That's negative 2 times 4, which is negative 8. Bring down that plus 5, bring down the plus 3. And we're going to see we only have these x tiles in one place. 5, but no x's. Negative 8, no x's. 3, no x's. So we're left with just negative 6x. But that means all of these units can be combined together. 5 positives, 3 more positives, but then we have 8 negatives, which means 5 plus 3 plus negative 8, and I can do it in that strange order because we're just adding all the way through. Addition is commutative, and we have no unit tiles. That's it on simplifying expressions with algebra tiles. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.